Hey, I'm Brian Levin. I'm the co-host of the Design Details podcast and co-founder of the Spec Network.
My name is Bryn Jackson, and I'm his co-host of Design Details and another co-founder of Spec Network. And we're here in our recording studio and office and my apartment in San Francisco.
So Design Details started out as a blog. I started in early 2014 writing these blog posts that were basically screen recordings of apps that had cool interactions, cool UI, cool animations, transitions, all this kind of stuff. And I would record the video of the thing happening, write a note about the thing happening, and maybe add a little bit of guesswork into why those things existed. People found this blog useful, so over time I started writing more and more and more, just sort of examining apps, trying to break them apart, find the Easter eggs, that kind of stuff.
I was one of those people that found it useful.
Yeah.
We ran into each other at a GitHub party. I had no clue that this was him. I had been using his blog all day that day for research, and I started telling him about his own blog and being like, this is such a cool thing, you should check it out. He's like, I know.
But then Bryn brought up the more interesting question is like, instead of looking at these UI patterns, what if we just talk to the people that made those UI decisions and actually go to the source and figure out who's behind this really cool work?
So we talked for like half an hour at the GitHub party and maybe half hour for lunch, and then we went out for dinner after talking about that to figure out what it could be. And so we'd known each other about 3 hours total when we when we decided to do this thing.
So both of us were pretty new to podcasting. Bryn has a background in audio engineering. I didn't know anything. Somehow we found this number that said most podcasts fail before they hit 8 episodes.
Don't know why that number stuck, but we used it.
So what we did is just, we're gonna record 8 episodes of this thing before we ever release anything into the world. We put out a teaser, we put together an email list on the Design Details blog. We started sharing it with our friends, tossing around the idea, getting feedback. Yeah, so we spent those first couple months figuring out how we were gonna work together, what we wanted the format to look like. Is this a strict Q&A? What's the message that we're trying to get across?
We got sponsorships by being kind of tipsy at a meetup and like talking a VP of marketing's ear off, and it just happened to work. We got our guests by just reaching out quickly. Sam, I had just met a couple weeks earlier by mistake. I've met Brian by mistake. It was just a bunch of convenient things that lined up, except for getting to know each other and make a thing consistently. We had a really great streak right at first of people that we really looked up to and knew from a long time ago. So we had Sam Sophis, and then Nick Slater, and then Wilson, and then Christy Tillman, and like just people that we really looked up to, and I think that helped a lot. We also, part of our big motivation in starting up was to provide this kind of access that we've had here in San Francisco to people back where we come from in Colorado and Minnesota, and where we didn't have design communities. So we really wanted to share that back to them. We told our sponsors we thought we'd get 2,000 listens in the first month, and we got 10,000 the first week, and we were like ecstatic. We didn't know what we were doing. That was the coolest thing. We were just watching the SoundCloud stats every day like, what is happening? So looking back, all these things sort of aligned, and that probably a bunch of it accidentally and by luck, but it ended up working out that in the early days, we hit this timing with Product Hunt, we had the blog, we got some reputable people to agree to come on the show. That series of events seemed to work for us. I still don't know anything about podcasting. I don't know what XLR stands for. I actually don't know that either.
Cool, so we're on the same page.
We started with some cheap USB mics. We could have done it with those. Once we got sponsorships, we bought nicer USB mics.
The clear example of how to be cheap starting a podcast is we couldn't afford pop filters, so we used Bryn's socks.
Yeah, fresh out of the laundry. We rolled up some socks over the top of them.
You're talking into the microphone, smelling Tide detergent in your nose, looking down at this sock.
They weren't new socks, but yes. Sam was very generous with us. Our pop filters hadn't arrived yet. We did order them. They're like $15. They're like not expensive, but they hadn't come yet.
When we first started, we didn't have mice. We're getting all the cheapest stuff, and we also didn't have a way to soundproof.
Covered his kitchen in blankets.
We went around all the cabinets and just draped blankets and made my kitchen a cave.
It was a blanket fort. It was great.
A blanket fort from when you're a kid is what we were inviting guests into my home to record inside.
I know it looks weird, but
It was,
It's for the best, I promise.
looking back, that was awesome. That was so great.
I'm glad we don't do it anymore.
Yeah, it was super dark, super,
Yep. His apartment was like a cave.
it was a cave, yeah.
So we didn't have mentorships per se when we started, but that was kind of a roundabout, like having the podcast was kind of a cheat code to getting a bunch of them at once. As far as learning to podcast, it was all just YouTube. I watched a bunch of tutorials to kind of remember where I'd been with like Logic Pro and all the software we used. The miking stuff was, I still remembered a lot of that. You kind of, it's like riding a bicycle, you'll just remember it. As far as design stuff, like that's what we really wanted mentorship in. And so we just reached out to everyone we looked up to and got them to tell us. It was great. So the stuff we were sharing, we were also learning a ton from. I think a lot of people's first instinct when they're starting a project or whatever is to find someone to build it with. If they don't know the thing, I think it goes a long way if you try and learn the thing yourself. And I think that's really valuable. And then along with that, don't try and learn everything about the thing, just learn the pieces you need to know first. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm gonna learn JavaScript because everything's written in JavaScript now. I need to go learn all of JavaScript. That's not a thing that's possible. The people who wrote JavaScript probably don't know all of JavaScript as it is now, so that's not worth your time.
Unlike other mediums, perhaps, the technical quality of the thing that you put out into the world matters way more than maybe like a YouTube video or something where no one really, not that they don't care, but it doesn't maybe matter as much. Whereas podcasts, you're going in someone's ears. So all these really small annoyances or bad audio production issues are just multiplied by 10 when you're sitting in someone's ears. So for us, that was kind of a constant struggle is, when's the right time to invest $400 or whatever it is into like a new thing that will make our audio quality 5% better?
We spent $1,200 right out of the gate. All of our sponsorship out of the gate into a bunch of microphones, and then as soon as we got another sponsorship, did it all over again. Got XLR microphones because the USB hub had issues, and we got a ton of feedback on quality, and we knew there was kind of a lower bounds for like acceptable, and we just worked our butts off to get there.
When we started, the goal wasn't to make money, but by making money, we enabled ourselves to do cooler and cooler things. And over time, we started dumping that money into our friends who also wanted to make podcasts and investing in them to help them, create their own content, get their own sponsorships. We're able to invest in a full-time producer who makes our audio sound good. Money's not the goal, but it's enabled us to do a lot more cool things that we're excited about.
So I think if you're going to launch something, you can't put your ego on it. You can't equate your work with yourself. You're going to break things. You're going to ship a bad first version. No amount of testing can stop you from doing that. Otherwise, you'll just keep working on it forever and never ship it, never release it, which happens constantly. You just have to know that you're gonna fix it as fast as you can.
Anybody can launch something. Something on my mind a lot is sometimes there's privilege involved in launching things. That's maybe not talked about quite as much. In our industry, I'm guilty of this. Go do side projects, work nights and weekends, do this kind of stuff. I'm not married, I'm young, I had a good job. These kinds of things enable you to spend free time doing more work.
A lot of people have to work nights and weekends already on another thing. They have to send money back home.
If you say, oh, go do side projects, it's not even an option. So the first thing is I would say we recognize the privilege we have to be able to work on side projects. That being said, I think anybody that can get to that point where they have a little bit of breathing room can launch something. And it's about being comfortable with maybe not being perfect. Probably the biggest moment was when we were doing 2 a week for a year straight. I was definitely verging on burnout, and I think in my mind it was this voice saying, you've done 2 a week every week for the last X weeks. You can't change it or else everything's gonna fall apart. But we did it and it worked out. And so for me, that's meant learning how to be a little bit more forgiving of changing things, not being so rigid in the structure or the consistency or something like that, to avoid burnout, to avoid this thing feeling like work. We've been really lucky to have sponsorships for a good portion of the time that we've been doing this, but we've also had a good portion of the time we've been doing this without sponsorships. I never felt the enthusiasm for the podcast really waver between those phases. So when we're making money, when we're not making money, and then back when we're making money. I think the show is the same, interviews are the same, We still met some rad people. We had a lot of fun with it. And that's like this huge signal to me that we had our goals and mind in the right place to keep it running longer. You know, if the money dries up, it can be a little bit, I don't know, less satisfying or maybe feel like a failure, but I think we found a way to mentally keep ourselves in check during the dry periods.
We never expected to have sponsorships consistently. We never expected to have them at first. We couldn't believe it actually worked. Our main goal was to meet people and share those experiences with people elsewhere and support that community. And that worked out great. Our first live show was at Epicurrence in Hawaii. That was super cool. We'd never done that before. And then after that, we got invited to do one at Etsy in New York. Things we wouldn't have expected to happen. We got to meet a ton of people all over, and it's kind of the best thing we could have done. We actually had a bunch of people tell us, don't do a podcast. We don't need another one. We're like, well, we think it's a valuable thing. We did it, and now we've done almost 3 million downloads of this show. We've started a network that has 11.5 million. We've helped a lot of people. We get people telling us all the time, like, you're why I'm in design. The show helped me get over this thing. This person's episode helped me learn a ton. Couldn't have not done it. Like, I would have severely regretted it.
But for me, what's really important is when people message me or email me and say, hey, the thing that you made, the podcast that you put out into the world, helped me do this, helped me want to become a designer, help me learn how to talk like a designer, that kind of thing. And so for me, that's my internal metric of success. And when we get crappy feedback or people throwing shade at us or people leaving us nasty iTunes reviews, calling us Silicon Valley douchebags, I'm able to find my happy place and think, okay, at least there's a couple people that I helped.